This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Greg and Nick with you here on the CLNS Media Network. This episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Greg, we start with Joe Burrow. He was a full participant at Wednesday's practice. We are recording this early on Thursday, so not sure if he's going to be a full participant on Thursday or not, but the million-dollar question is, do you think Joe Burrow plays on Sunday?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth on this, Nick. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, I just wouldn't I know Joe Flacco didn't practice yesterday, but Zach Taylor said that's been what they've been doing. Of course,
Yeah.
we know Joe Flacco's like 50 years old. And so they're pacing him. He does have some sort of minor injury that he's also dealing with, or not minor. I mean, it might be major. He's been playing through it, some sort of shoulder AC joint sprain type of thing. I'm just looking. So it's his right shoulder. He was limited, so he did something yesterday. I was just looking at our friend Trags, from who covers the Bengals out there. He used to be here. Nothing new today. I would just say, just because Joe Burrow practiced fully yesterday, I would not go crazy with it. Could he start on Sunday? Yes. I think, he's coming back from a serious injury, surgery to repair turf toe. There's a process to coming back with any injury. And look, I mean, if he gets out there Wednesday and Thursday, if he woke up today and he feels phenomenal, then yeah, he's going to start on Sunday. If, it's all about the bounce back and coming back from these injuries. They could also say, you know what, we're going to slow play this. I mean, he hasn't played in, how long. There's got to be some sort of ramp up. You don't want the franchise quarterback coming back and getting hurt in the first week, trying to rush things. Now, there is the sense that, if the Bengals are going to do anything this year, right now at 3-7, I mean, they basically need to run the table and go 7-0.
Yeah.
He kind of has to play this week. But basically my answer is, could he start? Yeah. Do I think he's going to start? I'm not sure. But the bottom line is, for me, and I'm sure we'll get into it, even if Joe Burrow starts, it doesn't change anything about this game as far as I'm concerned from a Patriots perspective. So that's really the most important thing, I think. I don't know what you think.
I don't necessarily agree with you on that last part, but let me
Really?
look at the Bengals, and I think you hit the nail on the head as far as why we're even talking about this and why he was a full participant on Wednesday. As you said, they're 3-7, and you're not going to get into the playoffs with 9 wins. It doesn't look like you're going to get into the playoffs with 9 wins. So you need to finish 10-7, and the only shot I think of the Bengals finishing 10-7 is if Joe Burrow's the quarterback and they put up points and they end up winning 7 straight. So I think that's why you are hearing a lot of this. There's no doubt in my mind that Joe Burrow wants to play. Would I play Joe Burrow if I was Cincinnati? Absolutely freaking not, because the likelihood of you running the table with this football team, even with Joe Burrow, is pretty much slim to none. And I think Slim just walked out of the room. So if I'm Cincinnati, I'm saying, and I know Burrow's going to fight. He's going to fight. He's going to fight. He's going to fight. And I know he wants to be out there for his guys, but I would do everything within every fiber of my being if I was the Cincinnati organization to sit down Joe Burrow and say, Joe, we know you want to play, and we totally get it, but we got to look at the big picture here, bud. And, how about you take a deep breath? Let's revisit this before Thanksgiving. And I would try, if I were Cincinnati, I would try to keep Burrow out the rest of the year. I would,
Mhm.
I don't know if you'd call it tank, but I guess you could say soft tank. I would soft tank, and I would try to get the best pick I could get for 2026. That's what I would do. So there's no doubt that he wants to play. As far as, would it change things? I do think it would change things to the point where you can't argue that Joe Burrow, even if he's, let's say, 85%, is a much better quarterback than Joe Flacco at this point. And
Yeah.
I think since he's shot in this game is a shootout. And I would give Cincinnati a much better shot of winning a shootout with Joe Burrow than Joe Flacco. So, I look at it and I say, and we've seen this Patriots defense against teams with limited weapons still give up plays and still give up some points. And I think Joe Burrow, every time he's on the field, is dangerous. So I do think that changes the math a little bit. But you also can't run away from Jamar Chase, right, Greg? And we didn't get into this earlier in the week, aside from just saying he was going to miss the game, and we thought the suspension would hold up, and it did. But Jamar Chase is suspended. He's not going to play. So I ask you, if you were the Patriots, how would you defend Tee Higgins on Sunday?
Well, first let's continue the Burrow discussion a little bit. I mean, as far as how he would impact this game. I did just look this up just so people have a frame of reference. Joe Burrow hasn't played a full football game since week 1 on September 7th. He got hurt against the Jags in week 2. He played 30% of the offensive snaps in that game. So it's been months since he's played an NFL football game. Um, I think Joe Burrow's incredible. I think what they've done to him in Cincinnati is a disservice on the level of, Andrew Luck with the Colts as far as not giving him enough protection. I also
Agree.
think scheme comes into that. I will say, look, does Joe Burrow give the Bengals a better chance to win? Yes. Um, if Jamar Chase played in this game, would I give the Bengals a puncher's chance to win this game? Yes, because they could conceivably outscore the Patriots. I mean, they could go up and down the field on the Patriots if they had their full complement. They're getting, looks like Mike Gesicki's going to be back at tight end. He does a pretty good job in the red zone. He's done a pretty good job, except didn't 1 year, I think I was at the game. Was that the season opener where he fumbled it like the goal line against the Patriots? Gerard Mayo, maybe, I don't know, something like
I
that.
think so. I
Yeah,
think that was him. I'm not totally sure, but I do
I'm
think that
pretty
was.
sure. I think it was him. Uh, so, but the bottom line is the Bengals have a historically terrible defense. I mean, they are god awful. They can't do anything. Like they're one of the worst teams against the run. They they're awful. And so, if Jamar Chase was out there, I would give them a chance to, win a game in the 40s. We've seen them do it before, with Joe Burrow and even, Joe Flacco at times. But not to have Jamar Chase, I give them absolutely no shot. They have no shot to win this game if Joe Burrow plays. As far as, whether you shelve them for the season, I think ideally that's the best thing for the Bengals. Like you said, sort of like a soft tank because they're so, and let's also remind everybody that they're not going to have Trey Hendrickson in this game. Their best cornerback, Cam Taylor-Britt, is also out in this game. They need all the talent and cheap talent that they can get with the way they've constructed this roster. They are awful. The problem is, and I agree with you. I would find a way to do it if I was in charge of the Bengals. But these are football players. The football players play football, especially a guy like Joe Burrow, who's a team leader. If I would think that Joe Burrow would be one of these guys that would have a tough time looking his teammates in the eye if he was healthy
Absolutely.
enough to play
Yep.
and they're having to be put out there. I think Drake Maye would be the same way. That if the Patriots, God forbid, were ever in this position and say, there were 4 games less than the season and he could come back, I think you could bet your ass that Drake Maye would be like, I'm playing. Those are my teammates. Those are my brothers. We fight together. We lose together, whatever. Like, this is what I'm getting paid to do. Um, but I still think at the end of the day, even if Burrow starts, I mean, do I give all right before? Let's say before this, Joe Flacco, I gave the Bengals a 3% chance of winning the game. If Joe Burrow plays this game, I now give them a 10% chance of winning this game. As far as Tee Higgins, and how I would defend a lot of people is different than what the Patriots do, which is one of my frustrations with this team. It's something, to monitor going forward. I think the Patriots really, what I'd like to see them do, and this will also be part of a question that we answer later on, and we should tease that we're going to have a BSJ members sort of mailbag after we get through talking about the Bengals. They need to play a lot more man-to-man. They need to do a lot more, robber coverage, single high safety, dive the other safety on to Tee Higgins, make him beat you with Ishivas and, everybody else. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a good, underrated wide receiver, and I actually picked him up on my fantasy team for this game, mostly because a lot of my guys are on a bye, but I was like, hey, why not? But, one of these times, Nick, I'd like to see the Patriots do a really good job against one of these teams that it seems like they face every week, where they have one good receiver and that's about it. And yet that one good receiver still has a decent day, if not better, against the Patriots. So, I'd love to see Christian Gonzalez on them with a little safety help over the top, or Carlton Davis with safety help over the top. Let's get into making a team play left-handed, but am I holding my breath? Do I think that's going to happen? No, they haven't shown any indication of that so far.
And that's the reason why I would give Cincy a chance. Again, I'm not saying that I would favor Cincinnati to win the game if Burrow's back, but we've seen it. We've seen the Patriots have trouble with Chris Olave, Drake London, Emeka Egbuka, even though these teams don't have really anybody else that would scare you. So I wouldn't put it past the Patriots defense to let Tee Higgins have 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, and Joe Burrow throw for 280 if he's out there. Like, I wouldn't put it past them. By the way, Tanner Hudson was the guy who fumbled on the goal line. I don't want Mike Gesicki cursing us. The confusion for you and I is that on the play prior, Gesicki looked like he had a touchdown, but it was overturned. So that was the issue. So Gesicki caught a pass against Kyle Duggar that looked like it was going to be a TD. It was overturned. And then the pass to Tanner Hudson, and Duggar was the one that chopped the ball and forced the fumble from Tanner Hudson. So,
by the way, since I butcher so many names, I've looked up the Bengals pronunciation chart. Can I get it right and say Andre Iosivas?
Iosivas.
That's how you pronounce it.
Iosivas. All right, for the Patriots injury situation. So again, we're recording this early Thursday afternoon. Wednesday, Ramondre Stevenson was limited. Kayshon Boutte, Christian Ellis, Terrell Jennings, Joshua Farmer all practiced in full. Jelani Tavai was not out there. Austin Hooper was in a non-contact. Aside from the Tavai stuff, Ramondre, Boutte, Ellis, Jennings, Farmer, Hooper, do you think they're all back on Sunday, Greg?
Yep. And, of course, things are coming up. Patriots again, maybe
aside from this, Milton Williams, who's their second best player, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I make sure you dial up the GoFundMe page that I started for Patriots.
I'm helping you out because people are going to bitch at you and go, Greg, they don't have Milton Williams, so I think it's fair to say Milton Williams is on the IR.
Yeah, I heard a caller in the Felger and Maz say, like, we're not going to have Milton Williams in this game, so it's like even between the injury situation between the two teams. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I think they're all back. I think, I thought the injury report was great news on the whole. I mean, Boutte goes full. Ellis, I don't really care, but, he's decent. Was full. Farmer's full. Jennings is full. The only thing I don't like, and of course, Hooper's coming back from a concussion, so limited. That's part of the protocol. And Ramondre Stevenson, who I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the running back. How would you handle the running back thing after this? But the only thing I don't like, aside from Milton Williams being on IR, is that both Chason and Landry are on there and limited. Chason has an ankle. Landry has the knee that he's been dealing with all year. that's probably the situation at edge and how good they are and how impactful they are and how they can last the season without very much real depth. They have plenty of depth. They have 6 guys at the edge. I don't know if any of them can really play. Ponders flashed at times, but that's one of my chief concerns with this team is the health and status of those 2 guys when they're going to the playoffs.
All right, so I got 2 more questions for you about this Cincinnati game from the Patriots' point of view. Then we'll hit up a Cincinnati pick later on in the show. As Greg said, we're going to do a mailbag in between that. So let's just a couple more questions. What do you do, Greg, defensively on the defensive line with Milton Williams out? Do you play Barmore more snaps? Do you play Tonga more snaps? Do you play them the same snaps and maybe give the younger guys a shot? Do you play Christian Barmore specifically in the spot of Milton Williams, which a lot of people would tell you is like, the 3 technique when Williams plays that? Do you do that with Christian Barmore? How do you juggle the defensive line on Sunday?
I am not doing anything different with Christian Barmore. I mean, maybe a few more snaps, as we've seen, whether it is in, how they deal with certain players, how they keep an eye on the future. I mean, this outfit has a plan in every way on what they're going to do, whether it's an easy training camp and stuff like that. They have their plan and they are not deviating from it. So their plan with Christian Barmore, resting him on Wednesdays, playing him limited snaps. I mean, for him, or at least a player of his caliber and how much you're paying him. They have the long game in mind with him. I am not changing that because that's all you need is for Christian Barmore to overexert himself, and now he's out along with Milton Williams, and now you're screwed.
Right.
I would just play everybody a little bit more. Tonga, Corey Durden's done a really good job. Josh Farmer missed last week, but he's done a really good job. I would bring up, probably somebody like Jeremiah Farms. I think he's more of a, sub rusher type that can help provide some of the pass rush. He's done that well in the past. So I'm not doing anything crazy, especially, in 1 week, the first week against a team like the Bengals. But, I'm sure they're going to keep their eye on the prize.
All right, last one for you as far as this game before we get to the pick later on. How do you split Ramondre Stevenson if he is back and Travion Henderson's touches?
If he's good to go, I'm sort of going back to not quite the dramatic split, but basically Stevenson goes back to being a starter. I will say that Travion Henderson, while it's far from perfect, his pass protection has gotten better. I would go to more of like a 60-40 split in terms of the snaps with those guys, with Stevenson getting 60%. I'd really like to, see Henderson more in the pass game. I think that's what they wanted, and maybe he's earned that right. And especially against this defense and these linebackers, I think he should be fine. And so that's what I would do.
All right. Before we get to the mailbag, let's get to Prizepicks. Greg, tell them about it.
You and I make decisions every day, but on Prizepicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this football season on Prizepicks, where it's good to be right. Love the app. It's fast, easy to use. Love sitting down in front of the game like I will tonight, Thursday Night Football with the Bills. Betting probably. Should I bet against the Bills players? Maybe. No, actually, I want them to do well because I want that Patriots-Bills game to be like high stakes. Here we go. For all the people saying the Patriots haven't played anybody, they have basically back-to-back playoff games. I'm looking forward to that. Prizepicks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prizepicks is the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Want to pick more on Josh Allen or Drake Maye's pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all 3 of them in the same lineup only on Prizepicks. Download the Prizepicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, it's good to be right.
And for those listening, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. For those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. Find our show and a lot of other great Patriots content. Also, make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new video drops. And don't forget to check out Greg and Mike Giardi over at BSJ. $50 for the year as they tag team Patriots coverage, film, and the best sources around. All right, let's jump to some BSJ member question and answer here. Mark Bennett, we start there. Talent wins and loses games. Patriots have few players of Pro Bowl caliber, less all-pro caliber. If the Patriots had average to below average quarterback play, do you think they'd have a losing record?
I do not. And let's just, I don't know, for comparison's sake, let's call this average to below average. So are we talking Josh Dobbs? I'm thinking more like Mac Jones. Like if Mac Jones was the quarterback with Josh McDaniels and his system and these guys, I think they would have a winning record. I think that they would look, Mac Jones beat Josh Allen and the Bills. Twice. Once doesn't count because it was the win game and he didn't have to throw the ball. He just handed the ball off all day. But I just think this is more about Vrabel's program, Josh McDaniels, the guys that they brought in. Their good injury luck to this point. I just have too much respect, especially for a guy like, we're talking about Drake Maye. So what we're really talking about is the offense. And I just have too much respect and think I've seen him do it with other guys. That I think that Josh McDaniels would figure out what he has and he would make it work, that they would be in every game. Would they be 9-2? No, they'd probably be more like 7-4, 6-5, but I think they would have a winning record. What say you, Nick?
Yeah. I mean, I think they would. I think they would probably have a winning record. I would lean towards maybe 6-5 instead of the 9-2.
Mm-hmm.
I think Drake is good for at least 3 extra victories. We can't overlook his ability to extend plays and scramble and what those opportunities led to. So I would tend to lean towards the 6-5 and give Drake a little bit more credit than just the 7-4. So I know you said 6-5, 7-4, probably in the same area there. Treats 30, Greg. The Pats signed Bradyn Swinson to the 53-man roster because another team wanted to sign him or put a claim on him. How does that work? Is this common? I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, but it is pretty common, right, Greg?
It is common, especially this time of year. You get a lot of teams that, especially the teams that are out of it. We did talk about it on Tuesday, and of course, not all of my BSJ members listen to the podcast, which is a shame.
How dare they?
I know. Basically the way it works is, if you want to sign somebody from somebody's practice squad, you need to sign them to your 53-man roster and they need to stay there for at least 3 weeks. What you get is a lot of these teams that are out of it, sort of looking at this as like, an extended tryout. And it's really guys, they signed not only Swinson, but CJ Dippre. These are 2 rookies. Often you go back to your college evaluation of these guys coming out in the draft. I mean, that's what you do. These were obviously whoever wanted to sign them, and I don't know the teams that did. They obviously like these players and, want to get another look at them. This is common this time of year. Guys are looking to fill the bottom of their roster. This would be an extended tryout. Is this somebody that we want to invite to camp or sign them to a futures contract after the season? Like I said on Tuesday, this to me, who knows? To me, this says nothing about the actual talents of the players because these other teams know nothing about. The last time they saw Swinson and Dippre was in the preseason and in training camp and in joint practices, and they were not good. They were released. They went on waivers. They went unclaimed, and they signed back with New England. They could have signed with anybody. And so there's no film out there. These guys are just throwing darts against the dartboard, or were attempting to. And the Patriots decided, no, we've been working with them. If they leave, then we really have no depth. At least these guys that know our system have been in our system. So, what the hell, we'll keep them. To me, it doesn't say anything huge about their futures here, or, even place on the roster next year. They like them. They've been in the system. They don't think they're a disaster, and so they're keeping them around.
All right, Devlin Nation. Greg, in your years covering the Pats, has any other team exceeded expectations or surprised you more than this one? And then in parentheses, they put after the first dozen games.
I would say, Mac Jones's year for sure. I mean, we had no idea what that team, was going to do. They were 7-9. They were coming off Cam Newton. You have a first-round quarterback. They had all these free agents that they brought in.
Yeah.
And you never know how those guys are going to hit. Like, half of them hit, how they're going to acclimate to the system, like all that. Of course, I would say one of the through lines is, Josh McDaniels was the guy that, integrated, Hunter Henry and Nelson Aguilar and, well, not so much Jonnu Smith. But, there's a lot of comparisons offensively, at least in terms of the results and some of the stats, like in terms of like explosive plays and points and all that stuff. McDaniels did a really good job that year. I would also say, I think, I want to say 2011, because, they ended up going 13-3. They went to the Super Bowl. That was probably the worst Patriots defense that I've ever seen. In my time covering the team, I thought they were 31st. I was just looking. They were 31st in yards that year. They were 15th in points allowed.
That's right. Bend don't break, baby.
Yeah, and they were pulling guys off the street and Julian Edelman to play in the secondary. And this is not a Patriots team, but I do want to mention, the 2007 Packers, the first year that I covered that team and coming aboard. You got to remember that was the second year of Mike McCarthy. And so the two previous years they had gone 4-12 under Mike Sherman. He got fired. McCarthy came in. Ted Thompson got rid of a lot of Brett Favre's guys. They had a terrible cap situation. A bunch of his offensive linemen and tight ends that things were not good in Green Bay, and nobody knew what to expect. And that team went, 13-3 and lost in a conference championship game to the Giants that they really should have won if Brett Favre wasn't 85 years old and couldn't play in the freezing cold. But I would say those three teams stand out.
All right, John A. Hillman. I think a big reason why most are stunned by 9-2 was the reporting by you, Greg, and other beat writers assessing Maye in camp this year. Some were saying the biggest problem with the team was maybe going to be quarterback, and that if anything, Maye had regressed from year one. What do you think explains the astronomical jump from August to late September for Maye?
He's not entirely wrong. I would say that's fair. I don't think that I certainly in my preseason column, I wouldn't say that the way he put it, the biggest, some were saying the biggest problem with the team was maybe going to be quarterback. I don't think I came close to saying that. I think there were a lot of questions. My thing more with Maye was, when is he going to click in this scheme? Because we really hadn't seen anything. He was terrible in the preseason games. He was terrible the second day in Minnesota when they got their butts handed to him. He was really good in the Commanders joint practice. It was more like, all right, well, when is this going to click? And he looked really uncomfortable. Week one, he looked really uncomfortable. So that's sort of where I was on him. His jump, I think it's about comfort in the scheme. It's a lot of confidence. It's about understanding, the stuff that he's doing at the line to get himself protected. He has a lot of confidence that he knows, he knows exactly what he's going to get. There's no surprises, really in terms of pass protection. So he understands that. That gives him a lot of confidence. I think Josh McDaniels understanding how to use all of these pieces, including Drake Maye, to move the ball, his ability to scheme up things around some of the offensive line stuff and also some of the limitations. That was one thing that, somebody pointed out to me recently, because I was asking people, I'm like, gee, I mean, Drake Maye, he is unbelievable. And, from where he was, like, say, the Vikings joint practice. And, they're basically like, well, the thing was in that Vikings joint practice, like, you're not scheming up, like, you're not chipping tight ends, you're not chipping running backs, you're
Right.
not moving the pocket all that much. Like, you're just like going toe to toe to see what you have. And the reason that they were a disaster that day is like, it was just the offensive line going up against Brian Flores and, Jonathan Grenard and all that. And it's just, Will Campbell's being left on an island against them. Like, there was no scheme. So that's more of an indication of like, if Josh McDaniels was just one of these coordinators that just did what he did, say like Alex Van Pelt last year, it would look pretty shaky, at least for a while. But you combine, I give most of the credit to Josh McDaniels, his ability to coach the quarterback and make him comfortable, and also the system and the tools, and Drake, being far more advanced to be able to use the tools. Like I wrote a column on Monday about that, some of the stuff that he did in this past game. You put all those things together and you have one confident quarterback.
Couple things. One big question that you did have about Drake Maye was his comportment, his ability to handle adversity at points, and whether or not he cared enough, or I don't know if that's fair, but just kind of how he handled some of the questions about things that he wasn't doing well. You had those questions as well about Maye before the season kicked off. I think, all the stuff that Greg said, 100% as to why he's made this huge leap. But I also think it's a lot of the intangible stuff. And this is where, like, you just don't know until you see it play out, where you hear good things. And I, from what the reporting and everything that we had heard leading into the draft and those stories that came out right after he was drafted, I wasn't too freaked out about how he would handle things and all that. I thought he would be fine. I thought he would be a really good leader. I thought he would be able to handle things maturely. But as far as, work ethic, football IQ, those types of things, you don't really know until you see it play out. So I think what we're seeing here from Drake Maye is a deadly combination. And that is raw talent. Just he has raw talent. Everybody saw it in North Carolina. You saw it in flashes in his rookie season. He can do things that not a lot of other quarterbacks can do. B, the intangibles, the stuff that, the compete level, the work ethic, the football IQ, the ability to process quickly, learn quickly, all of those things. And then, as Greg said, also, McDaniels and this scheme and the ability to help him out when he needs the help. So you don't see as many, downs as you might see as he's trying to grind through certain things. I think it's really kind of a perfect storm that has led to this huge leap as quickly as it has happened. All right, we'll continue.
Yeah, I will say, Nick, real quick on that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, those were, like you said, those were questions that me and others had because we didn't really know anything about Drake Maye. But I think, what we've seen, for example, his footwork. It's been weeks since I've noticed anything on film with his footwork where he gets clickety clack or he drifts in the pocket. Like it's, he makes these corrections. So, he's answering those things for me in terms of, yeah, he obviously is being maniacal about being a really good quarterback and doing the things. He's not just shrugging his shoulders and being like, he's solved the turnover issues. Like when he was turning the ball over early on in the season, we were like, oh, well, here we go again. Like, is he going to be, two-a-day May where he turns the ball over 2 times and he figures that stuff out. So, a lot of those questions and the mechanical stuff that we saw, and whether it was in training camp or the preseason games or even like week 1 against the Raiders, to me, it's those things creep up when Maye's indecisive about what he's going to see.
Yeah.
He's very decisive now, and that's because of McDaniels and how and Maye's understanding of the offense and all that stuff. I do think, and I think he's been fine with adversity. He hasn't had a ton of it. I think that's maybe one of the last big check marks is, hey, when he gets down 2 scores and the 2 times they've been down 2 scores, that's their 2 losses. he gets down 2 scores in the second half, how's he going to react? I mean, I'm not insinuating that he's going to go curl up in the fetal position and, and suck his thumb on the bench. But, does he try to play hero ball? Does it get out of control? Does it get worse? The turnover thing, does he get more indecisive? Because the defense can do different things. They don't have to worry about the run. All those things. Some of those things are still question marks, but to this point, faster than I think anybody anticipated, he's been checking everything off this season.
I do think he has faced adversity. I get the whole 2 scores thing, but I mean, he hasn't had a run game for most of this season. His third down passing numbers, his passing statistics and analytics in obvious passing situations are through the roof. And a lot of those we've seen it. We're talking 3rd and 7, we're talking 3rd and 14, we're talking 3rd and 12, and that's adversity within a game when you're consistently facing 3rd and long because you have no run game and you consistently make ridiculous plays on 3rd and long to help your team march down the field and eventually score points. I think that shows us his ability to battle and get through adversity. I also think we've seen games where he hasn't gotten off to a good start, right? He's a bad first half or a mediocre first half, and then the second half he comes on like gangbusters. So I do think there have been examples of him fighting through the adversity. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens if he gets down big and if he can, author a huge comeback at some point. I would also just say, a lot of the stuff with the, when he's not decisive and he's not sure what he sees, that happens to most quarterbacks. I mean, of course, there are guys that seemingly never get flustered. But I mean, Josh Allen last week threw one of the worst interceptions you will ever see on God's green earth, and he finished with 6 touchdowns. But the pick against Tampa was as bad as it gets. It was a 2-hand flip into the middle of the field. I mean, it was just outrageous. So, and we see Jared Goff, right? When Jared Goff gets sped up and he's not super sure what's going on, he can kind of melt down. Even Patrick Mahomes threw a terrible pick last week against Denver in the red zone when he's extending. It was somewhat similar to Maye's pick against, I think it was Tampa in the end zone, right? Where, Mahomes is kind of rolling out to his right. The pick wasn't in the end zone. I think it was like around the, 5 to 10 yard line, but Mahomes just didn't see the guy that was underneath in the coverage and just threw it. And the dude leaps up and comes down with a pick in the red zone. So I do think we have to understand. I said this earlier in the year, and it's not to say that Drake Maye is flawless. Of course he's not. But that's the point. Like, I do think as you watch more football around the league, those moments of, holy shit, what was he thinking? Those things happen. And they happen to the best quarterbacks. They happen to Allen. They happen to Mahomes. They happen to Jackson. It's just how often do they happen, and how do you come back from that type of play when they happen? So, but those things are going to happen, and we've got to live with them. All right, we got more member questions, and I want to get to Greg's pick. But first, don't forget CLNS Media Network, behind-the-scenes content, of course. They've got the Celtics podcasts, NBA History Channel, Bruins Rinkside, and, of course, Patriots Press Pass, which I talked about a little bit earlier. All right, back to the questions. HPM2894, if that is your real name. Looking at the Jets' return for Sauce Gardner, are you trading Gonzalez if offered a similar return? Is Vrabel, and are they viewed as being on the same level around the league?
So,
it was 2 first and A.D. Mitchell.
Okay, so to me, here's the essential question. This is what I would do if I were the Patriots. They need to figure out, and maybe it morphs over the end of the season or what have you. They need to figure out what kind of defense they're going to be. Like, are they going to play man coverage or not? Like, because right now they're primarily a zone team. I know I'm sure they like to have the versatility and all that. I would say they use that to a much lesser extent than Bill Belichick did. So first of all, they need to answer that question, and then they need to build, like, because I judging off of Vrabel and what we've seen so far here, this is a team that's primarily zone, and they like to run the fireside zone. They like fire zones and all that stuff, and so really it's off of that, because if you're going to be mostly a zone and that's what you're comfortable in, that's what you've always done.
Yeah.
Then I would entertain trading Christian Gonzalez, because if you're going to play zone, you don't need great cornerbacks. You just need capable cornerbacks that can tackle, that are smart, tough, like all that stuff. And getting 2 first-round picks and a borderline, somewhat of a speedy starting receiver. Say what you want about AD Mitchell, but he's a young player. I would certainly entertain that. So I'm not saying I do it. Do I think Sauce and Gonzalez are viewed the same around the league? I would say close. But Sauce is definitely, I would say, a cut above in terms of reputation and what he's done in the league at this point.
I would take Gonzalez over Sauce. And I know people will be like, oh, it's because you do the Patriots on Locked On and you're from New England. No. Sauce is more of a zone guy. He is. Sauce is not a travel, shadow, lockdown, the number one receiver type dude. He's just Christian Gonzalez plays more man coverage when he's asked to than Sauce Gardner. He has proven that he can play man coverage. I also think that Christian Gonzalez sneakily might be even more physical than Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner, a lot of people thought, last year he was making business decisions for his contract. Well, he came back after getting a big contract and looked like the same Sauce Gardner. So I'm not telling you he's a terrible corner, not even close. Of course he's a good corner and sometimes looks like a really good corner. But I think Robert Saleh's system, remember, it's one of those zone scheme systems. It's similar to, Richard Sherman and stuff like that, where Richard Sherman's a very good corner, but Richard Sherman wasn't asked to lock dudes down and play man coverage for 50% of the time or whatever it is, right? So I think Christian Gonzalez, if he stays healthy, he will be considered a top 3 or 4 corner in football in due time, and they play differently. But yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in. I do think they're different types of cornerbacks. All right, Murphy 558. How much concern should there be that Josh McDaniels will be one and done here in New England? And I just want to say this. I love New England, man. I am a New Englander, born and raised, and I understand the paranoia and the concern. And I tweeted earlier this week that I had the Patriots winning 9 games this year, and it was a good time to appreciate what they've done with this crazy turnaround at 9 wins already through 11 weeks. And I said, ceiling wise, I think they could win 11 games. I said that before the season. And the ceiling was if Drake Maye made a huge leap and they stayed healthy, they could go 11-6 with this schedule. And I had posted, it looks like they got a good shot. They got a great shot at 11 plus wins. And of course, I had a couple people come back and be like, great shot. They have 9 wins and look at the schedule. They should have 11 by the bye. And my explanation was, I'm from New England. I don't take anything for granted. Okay. So I understand Murphy's question, but there's more of this happening, Greg, over the past couple of weeks where people are starting to freak out a little bit, man. Josh McDaniels, is he going to leave? Is this going to be a one and done situation? Bedard, what do you think?
No, this is not going to be a one and done situation. Now, am I 100% on that? No, it only takes one team and one crazy owner, and there are plenty of crazy owners in this league. And he also Murphy put in his question about factoring in the continued talk in some circles if Vrabel doesn't want McDaniels anyway. Don't listen to these people. Okay.
Hold on. Where's that come from? Where's that?
Felger and Mass.
I did not include this in the question because it's such shit. It's shit that we threw out in the toilet and flushed before the season kicked off. Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels were linked in December of last year, before Jerod Mayo was fired, before Mike Vrabel interviewed, before Mike Vrabel got the job, before Josh McDaniels got hired as the OC. Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels had been linked. Albert Breer, I said this too many times. Albert Breer was on radio in Chicago when the Chicago Bears fired Matt Eberflus after the memorable, holy shit, he did not call a timeout during Thanksgiving while millions of people watched. Eberflus was shot to the sun by Chicago. Chicago knew they were looking for a new coach. Burt went on Chicago. I think it was Chicago 1000, the ESPN station. And Burt at that time, weeks before the end of the year, at that time said, Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. This is not a Robert Kraft production. So, Murphy, I know you're not saying that, but don't even speak it. Don't even bring it up. It's dead. It's over with. Why are we concerned about this? They're 9-2. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, so I would just say the only way that say that Murphy scenario comes out. First of all, this is a guy who didn't last past like the midway point in both of his jobs, and there was discussions about disgruntlement in the locker room and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The only way it happens, I do think that there's a lot of circumstances that happen in Vegas, but the only way this happens, and say you do get some owner who's like, I know Mark Davis personally, and like they know a lot of things that went on in the Raiders and it was a disaster. Like if they called up Dave Ziegler, for example, who was Josh's GM, and Ziegler got the job first and then hired his buddy. They were both here in New England. Like Ziegler would basically tell you that Josh had no chance in Vegas with Mark Davis, that Mark Davis completely undercut him. Now, if it would take an owner going to guys like, Dave Ziegler, talking to some of the Raiders players to say it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be, like all that stuff, he had no chance. And look at what the Raiders are doing this year when they thought they had everything right. Tom Brady and Pete Carroll and, all this stuff. And they're a dumpster fire as well. But the odds of that happening are very, very long, at least at this point in time. Maybe I would say, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. And, also there are a lot of family considerations for Josh McDaniels. He's talked about how he doesn't see himself moving out of Westwood and moving his family out of Westwood anytime soon. There are a lot of those things. So I know everybody's worried and everybody wants what's best for Drake and, everything. And I understand that, and they're not wrong, but don't worry about everything. Just go out into the sunshine and realize, the quarterback, the coaching situation that you have here this season, just enjoy it and wait for that stuff after.
It's just it really is so New England. I love it because I've gone through it myself, like 9-2. And it's like, yeah, but what if McDaniels leaves after the year? And by the way, love Josh as an OC. He's not a good head coach. He's just not a good head coach. I worked in Sacramento during his time in Vegas. I watched every Raiders game. He's not a good head coach. He doesn't make good strategic decisions, especially in close games. Timeout usage. There's a lot of problems. And that's fine. You don't have to be a great head coach. Now, not everybody can transition from coordinator to head coach and be brilliant. I don't think he's a very good head coach. And he failed at both stops. So I don't know why anybody would go after him in the NFL. And if people say, oh, well, because I heard Bert say this on NBC Sports Boston, well, the job he's done with Drake Maye. Well, you also have to credit Drake Maye for some of this too. I mean, it's not like Josh McDaniels is taking a guy who was picked in the 5th round and making him unbelievable. I mean, Drake did, again, have natural talent. And some argued he was the best quarterback in that draft, if not at least the second best quarterback in that draft. So, yeah, it's completely different when you're a head coach and you have to handle a quarterback because you're handling the entire team. And again, in game, I don't think Josh was very strong as a head coach. I really don't. So I don't see it. Maybe college, but I think Josh would probably look at Belichick and Bill O'Brien and go, yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't see it. He might look at Matt Patricia and be like, all right, well, yeah, if my time is done in New England and I want to still coach, maybe I'll be a coordinator for a top program. But headaches for head coaches in college, man. Oof. All right, Trevor Naughton, big boy, good offensive.
I got Nick. Just like I got to wrap up. I got to go to an appointment. I got to run. So let's just skip ahead.
I did not know that. It's okay.
Yeah, my fault.
It's all good. All right, let's get right to the pick then. Greg's calling an audible at the line of scrimmage. Greg is 7-4 straight up.
Check.
He is 7-4 against the spread. Alert. The Patriots are -6.5. This was as high as 8.5. The over-under is 50.5. Pick the game, Greg.
By the way, I'm not identifying you at the mic because there's no way you're blitzing. You're definitely getting picked up at the line of scrimmage. So I'm not declaring you the mic. I'm not worried about you.
I don't know. I'm not.
I'm more worried about Kelly. I'm more worried about Kelly coming on the cross dog. than I am you. This game's going to be, it's a big nothing burger. I don't care if Joe Burrow plays. It makes it a little bit more interesting if he does. I have questions whether he does. I'm leaning towards no, but in any event, it's a Joe Burrow plays. My score is going to be 35-24, but I don't think it's going to be that close.
All right. Greg apparently has to run. Hopefully everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We're back on Tuesday. Greg, go, run. See ya. Bye.